They're the cheapest leads, the cheapest cost per client, the highest on the close rates and stick rates and all of that. And we try to tell people they're going to drive and they're going to pay for all your new marketing funnels. So you cannot forget about them.
Welcome into Impactful Conversations, stories and lessons for financial advisors. I'm your host, Dave Edgecombe. Joining me, I've always wanted to say this, we've got a friend of the show, Erica Pauly, founder of Track That Advisor. Now, Erica joined us back in January, and we talked kind of numbers for financial advisors and what the landscape looks like. Well, now she's back with us because her and her team at Track That Advisor have sort of their mid-season report. The numbers are in for the first half of 2025, and her team put together a phenomenal report and trying to make sense of it. Now, you guys pride yourself on being data storytellers and not just here's a number dump. Here's actually kind of the narrative behind it. So I welcome you to the show. Thank you for joining us. And I want to know, with your first half of 2025 report, I mean, what jumps out the page at you?
Yeah. Thanks for having me back. It's so good to be here. And I'll talk
we love
data
having
all
friends
day
of the
long.
show.
This is my favorite thing to talk about. So we typically don't do mid-years. So we can talk through that later, but it was a big deal for us to do a mid-year review. We always do an aggregate. We always do the annual for everyone. But people kept telling us, like, I wish I would have known that wasn't working. Or I wish I would have known midway through last year that this was like a problem for a lot of offices. One, so I could pivot, and two, so that I wouldn't have felt so alone in that. So that's really where the mid-year idea came from. It included 115 offices. So it was a really big data set. It was about $3 billion of new business that came in. So it was a lot of leads. I think it was like 25,000 set first appointments. So we followed a lot of money and a lot of leads, and what happened with that. And to your point, I'm a huge believer in not just throwing numbers at people. I want people to understand it. I want them to understand it, like when you pull on this thread, how that affects this other number over here. And that's the point of the data story. So some numbers have fluctuated. Some have increased from last year. Some have decreased from last year. Overall, as a nation, we're doing okay. So it's not the best year ever. It's also not the worst year ever. So we're kind of hanging in the middle. And there are definitely some big takeaways that I would love to kind of chat with you. Do you want me to kind of share my top ones that we went through?
Well, I'm more kind of curious, just from your perspective as sort of a data scientist and the numbers game, is what's the hesitancy with the mid-season report?
The hesitancy. So we have a very, very long sales process in this business. So it is 90 days before you start seeing a lead to when they're going to even end up closing, let alone the fact that you spent the money probably a month before that. So 6 months really isn't that long. We even have a lot of offices that will do a rolling annual review for them, which is 6 months past the prior year, simply because it's just so long in our industry. So it is hard to do 6 months worth because you and I were talking before, and I loved how you talked about it, like it's still cooking, right? Like a lot of these leads are still in process and they haven't closed. Therefore, the ROI is going to raise. Therefore, gaps are going to lower, which we'll talk about gap in a little bit. So all of these numbers do move and shift. And the other problem too, but you'll run into this no matter when you pull data. I just hear people fight me on it all the time. I can pull the data, June 30th, and by July 1st, it's all different. So I have to draw a line in the sand somewhere, but almost always there will be advisors who come to me and be like, well, it's, just not yet. It just takes so long. And I'm like, I know, but when we slice this data in another 6 months, you're going to have the same response, right? Like there's always going to be people in the hopper. There's always going to be people in the pipeline. So there is a hesitancy there a little bit, just because 6 months.
It makes me think of leveling out. It makes me think of something kind of leveling out and sort of the ebbs and flows of the business. And like you said, the sales cycle in general. That said, what jumps out to you? I mean, 6 months in, you look at that 6 month snapshot. What's the one thing that you look at and you say, oh boy, this is maybe not a cause for concern, but it certainly got your guys' attention?
Biggest shift, and it's one of the shifts I've never seen, is dinner seminars. So
and that's feedback that we got as well from some of our advisors, just about dinner seminars in the sales cycle.
Yep. The funnel itself is functioning much differently than we've ever seen it. I've done these aggregates for a very long time. So we measure lots of different things when we look at the funnel. It's not just how leads are moving, but it's like cost per appointment, cost per client, stick rates, close rates, average case size. We're measuring kind of every different point around that marketing funnel to get a really good grasp on what's happening. And the dinner seminar people are having a really hard time sticking for appointments. We did see a drop in 2024. And I will say this is consistent. It happened in 2024. It's still happening in 2025, that it's a lower first meeting stick rate. Our benchmark is a 70 and they're sitting at like a 60, 65 average. So that's below benchmark. What we've never seen before ever is a second meeting stick rate problem. And we are having a second meeting stick rate problem. That one is quite concerning.
What do you attribute that to?
A lot of things. And you may or may not like my answer on some of them, but this
Try me.
this is me just looking at so much data. And I'm actually also in the middle of doing mid-year coaching for everyone individually. So, I mean, I've looked through at least 25. I have another 40 to go. And I can speak to this point, like I am seeing second meeting stick rates having a very big issue. Okay, so I've three theories on this. This is theory. This is not just totally data. So I have to at least give you a disclaimer.
Little disclaimer on it. I got
yes,
you.
because I do deal with data. The first one that I've just seen more of in recent years with AI coming on board and all of these things that are tailored to specific financial advisors is the automation and removing the human element. That does not fare well with prospects when you're trying to get them to come in for an appointment. Like the Calendly situation, it's very easy to reschedule. It's very easy to not show up for the appointment. It's a click of a button versus our team is calling you, right? The advisor sits with them. They say, all right, does next Tuesday work at 3? I'm going to send you some follow-up information. Let's do this. We have a lot of advisors moving to this automated thing that they all think is saving time, but ultimately it is costing them a lot of money of people not showing up for appointments. So that's my first thought.
And that's not exclusive to just dinner seminars though, correct? That would just be the sales process in general. That could be a radio lead, but if you are making it too easy for them to make an appointment and conversely cancel an appointment, you've got a sales process problem. That's not just devoted to dinner seminars, right?
Yeah, it's high. It's lower for dinner seminars right now because that's the bulk of the leads. So it's weighted.
Okay.
Does that make sense? There's just more leads coming from dinner seminars, so it's weighting it down.
Yeah.
But we are seeing it. We're seeing it with other sources as well. I just did a call today with somebody who their referrals aren't showing for second meetings. I mean, it's just it's weird. It's weird that that's happening. So that's my first thing. My call to people is like, what are you automating? Do you need to have a human element a little bit back in there?
Yeah.
This is a process issue, not a marketing funnel issue, which a lot of people want to blame the marketing funnel. And that almost always is never the case. It's usually a people or process problem. And that's typically kind of what we're seeing right here with that.
Yeah. I think that makes sense because, I mean, a lot of the financial advisors that we deal with are priding themselves on being independent, and they're the small shop, and it's a David and Goliath. And if you want to go to Merrill and some of those big name
corporate
things,
yep.
You go that route, and then you get the count. But that's where it's a kind of a give and take about, yes, I want to welcome in 2025 and I want to be with the times, but at the same time, that phone call goes a long way, especially when you're trying to keep somebody on the line.
It does. And I'm seeing it, and that stinks. The other thing, which is this one is so easy, but I keep hearing it from everyone that I'm doing these calls with who are having this issue. A lot of them, I don't know if it was because refi business was so busy last year or what, but a lot of them have just gotten away from their normal, known, proven process. Like they've gotten lazy or they just stopped doing it because things were working well. And so they got lax on it. I've heard from more people, they're like, you know what? We used to do this and this was like actually part of our process and we don't do it anymore. And I'm like, guys, what is happening? Follow your process.
Yeah.
So that's the second one that I've heard is people literally are just going away from their proven process. The last one has to do with offices that are scaling and growing. We bring on new advisors. And again, simply because dinner seminars carry the bulk of the weight. And most often when we are hiring new advisors to come onto our staff, they start seeing the dinner seminar leads or doing the dinner seminars because that's how we're feeding them leads initially. but they're green and they don't know our process. And if you've strayed away from your process, that's even worse. And so they aren't trained. And so we're just seeing as offices are growing, we're hiring more green advisors. They're not trained in the process, and therefore stats are starting to drop. So that's another one of my like top 3 reasons why I potentially think this is why dinner seminars are struggling, but they are. So we really need to rethink them, and we really need to focus on them, because that's the bulk of where leads are coming from.
Yeah, I think the expansion of offices and bringing on new faces and just saying, hey, go to this dinner seminar, you work with my company now, and just sell, do what you've always done. And maybe they've got some experience, but their experience is maybe a different sales cycle and maybe a different process, and they're not using the same language, and it's a little bit more passive than maybe it needs to be. Do you think that advisors need to then almost silo off, like, hey, if they've got 3 downlines, they need to keep track of Tom, Joe, and Larry and see which one, track their specific seminars and say,
1,000%. Yes.
Do you think is that the norm?
That's what we do. I mean, at Track That Advisor, that's what we're looking at. We're looking at the presenter themselves and how they did with those leads, or the leads that they saw for that advisor specifically, right? So it might be, and I share this story a lot. We have, and I just did a coaching call today. We have 2 guys. They both they're supposed to be doing the same sales process. One is not moving people to a second meeting, not very many of them, but he's doing a great job of closing. The other one is moving a ton to a second meeting and not closing any at all. And I can sit here with the owner and say, they're obviously not following the same process. They have 2 totally different ways that they're doing business. That is why I love data, because they can't argue with it. And we figured out with one of them, the guy who wasn't moving as many to a second, but closing more, he's just a serious advisor. He's really intense. He's really calculated. Not everyone wants to move because he's pretty serious, but the ones that he does move are ready, and they're not surprised when he comes in with the close because he's prepared them. The other one is super vivacious. Everyone loves him. He's excited. He's a sales guy. Everyone books the second meeting. Everyone shows up, and then he drops the hammer for the close, and they're like, wait, what? I'm not ready for you to close me. So he's losing them. So they're not doing the same process. And that, to my whole point, is like why we track them separately, because we got to figure out who's doing what in their process.
What else jumps out to you from the dinner seminar standpoint? Anything?
Those are the 2 biggest things, is really what's going on in the sales cycle. And when that happens, I think I mentioned earlier, like when you start pulling certain threads, it affects other things. So when our stick rates drop and then our close rates drop because of that, our cost per client goes up. So now not only is our cost per client going up, but the ROI is going down. So like all of these things, when stuff starts happening in the sales cycle, it's affecting acquisition costs and it's affecting our returns. I will say dinner seminars, even with the drop, even with the increase in cost per client, the ROI was still positive. It's barely positive by 6 months in, but it is positive. And that's earlier when I'm like, we're doing okay. That's what I mean. Like, we're not hitting out of the park. We're not hitting a $250 ROI on seminars right now, but we are in the black by the first 6 months. And to my other point, everything's still cooking. We still have a lot of pending leads. So I would just watch it. That'd be my biggest thing, is really pay attention to what they're doing. And if they're acting funky, you're not alone. So
I think we've got 2 opportunities to sort. There's two roads that come off of this, and we'll get to both of them, but I want to get to one first. And I guess it's that gap and this concept that you guys have with gap, and it basically being, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's business that basically gets started, at the end of 2024 and takes, until it gets, the sign on the dotted line, they become a client. Yep. And the gap signifies the amount of time that it takes. And you guys believe and you guys see that the gap is widening, in that more and more business from 2024 is starting to close in 2025. Did I get that right? A, and B, what does an advisor make of I think it was 51% was the gap for 2025. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You did get it right. And you actually probably labeled it better than I would. I use way too many words to explain it because I tried too hard to get people to understand it. Yes. Essentially, it's looking at the difference between everything that got written this year from this year's spend versus everything you've written at all this year. Right? So, yes, it's people who started the process in the tail end of last year, to your point, but it also includes the people who like reach out in January, February, but you had marketed to them last year and they just weren't ready to close. So
Okay,
you've
so
either
it's really
dripped
what,
on them,
yeah, okay.
it's anyone that just wasn't from this year. So that they were measuring this gap. It tells us a lot. So I'm gonna get nerdy and tell you the actual percentages because I think it's crazy how big of a jump it is. But in 2024, the overall gap was 24%.
That's for the whole year. That's all of 2024.
For the whole year.
Right?
Yep. The aggregate 2024. So at the end of the year, basically what we were saying is 24% of the business that all the advisors wrote don't even get counted towards the ROI because it was all previous year stuff. We determined basically you have a high gap if it's 30% or above. That's kind of our benchmark now that we use for gap. Right now at mid-year, the overall gap is 45%. It's huge. So the bulk of the business being written right now, almost the majority. So 45% of the business being written right now is from last year's or previous year lead stuff. Therefore, only 55% of the advisor's business is counted toward the ROI, making the ROI look low, even if we're having a good year. Does that make sense?
I think so.
Okay.
And what's the mistake that an advisor can then make when they look at gap or they look at ROI in general for their year?
Yeah. I mean, and this is why I don't think ROI should be a leading decision maker for anyone because anyone could be pulling, a dollar ROI or less. So it looks like we're losing money. This happens all the time. It looks like it's in the red. But really, you have millions of dollars that have come in this year. They're just from last year's spend. And they didn't get to be attributed to last year's ROI. So you have this like gap that never gets counted anywhere. It kind of goes into no man's land. And it's very misleading for ROI, extremely misleading. The other thing with gap to take into consideration, and this is me maybe projecting a little bit towards what to plan for the end of this year and how I see this going. Gap always starts really high for the year because in January and February and March, all we're writing is last year's business.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the beginning of the year, pretty much all you're doing is this big gap number and it decreases as the year progresses. So while we're at 45% at mid-year, my guess is that will drop a little bit by the end of the year. So I don't think we'll sit that high. I think it'll continue to drop, but I do think the fact that it was at 24 last year and we're sitting at 45 now is very telling that more people are writing more business from previous years, meaning they're doing a really good job of nurturing, meaning you and I have talked about this before, but the unmeasurable kind of comes into play here.
Okay, no, now we got to tell the folks about the unmeasurable because I've also heard from other advisors about the unmeasurable. So tell me what the unmeasurable is.
The unmeasurable, it is that aloof, untouchable number that everyone wants to throw out in a coaching call, and they're like, well, the ROI there kind of could be higher because I'm doing this layering effect, right? I've got radio and then they come to the seminar, but then I'm also on TV. So you can't really judge the ROI because all of them are working together. This is the unmeasurable.
It's a data storyteller's nightmare is what it is. Is what it sounds like.
It totally is. And funny story on that, I tried to write a paper on it. I actually was interviewed on a podcast and I told them a paper was coming and I went to write the paper and could not, this is what I do for a living is write papers on this. And I could not find a way to do it. One, I wanted to start with like, if you did dinner seminars, what happened to the ROI if we added radio and we added TV? But all these offices added them at different times and then they were like dropping radio. There was no consistency and you have to have that when you're doing aggregation. Mm-hmm. So what we were able to find, I will say, the closest I can get to the unmeasurable was I studied all the offices that added other funnels on top of dinner seminars. And they definitely grew and their overall marketing ROI did increase. So I can say that it wasn't necessarily just with seminars. It's just that TV and radio forced them to grow and kind of step up their game. And then I compared those offices to the offices that did not adopt radio or did not adopt TV. And those people's ROIs did not increase. So that's like the best I can give you.
I mean, it sounds like a switch, basically. It's not, it's frustrating to probably measure because it is a 10%, 20%, 30%. It's if you do dinner seminars and you did radio, it helps. And if you didn't do radio, it didn't help.
Yep. That's
Basically,
what I can
yeah.
say. Yep.
You flip
From
the
a
radio
data
switch
standpoint.
on. Speaking of radio, what jumped out to you from the radio standpoint? Because I know we've got people have been killing radio off for years and years and years, and I've got a whole radio department here that says not so fast, not so fast. So, what does the first 6 months of the year look like for radio?
Radio looks good. Radio has been like this surprising middle child situation for the last 3 years because I'm with you. I started in this industry a really long time ago and radio was cool. Like it was the cool new kid. And then all of a sudden everyone didn't want it to be the cool new kid and it was the nerd. But it is it's now, honestly, it's more consistent than dinner seminars. So the stick rate is nailing it. It's above benchmark. Movement to a second meeting is above benchmark. Keeping the second meeting is above benchmark. And the close rate, our kept first to client is it's like at a 29%. Our benchmark's a 30. So, I mean, it is one of the healthiest funnels that we're looking at from a sales process standpoint, from cost per client. The ROI was sitting at a 194. So we do want it to be at about 250 for mid-year, but radio is in one of the top 5 high gap funnels. So when you talk about gap, it shows a low ROI. So radio's in the top 5.
We have to have that conversation with advisors all the time that start radio and they do it for 2 months and they say, I've gotten one call, it's not working. Well, radio is a slow burn. I mean, you got to give it 6 to 9 months before people get to know you and start to make those calls and make those connections. And that lends itself to a high gap. I mean, that's
100%.
Basically the definition of it right there.
Yes.
When we talk about, dinner seminars, okay. Radio, okay. Referrals seem to be the thing that's kind of moving the boat along right now based on the stats that you guys have collected, right?
Yeah. Referrals are always going to be the highest of all of it. They're the cheapest leads, the cheapest cost per client, the highest on the close rates and stick rates and all of that. And we try to tell people they're going to drive and they're going to pay for all your new marketing funnels. So you cannot forget about them. And we have to pay attention to them. So one of our benchmarks is 30 to 40% of your business should be coming from existing clients and referrals combined. Last year was weird because of replacements, but referrals kind of got forgotten last year. And I warned everybody, I'm like, do not forget about your referrals. With replacements dwindling, we have to get them back up. And the good news there is that people have. They've returned to them. Referrals are back up. This is my pitch to anyone listening. If you have forgotten about them, go back to them. They will pay for your marketing funnels and they will keep your ROIs healthy. So I'm a huge believer in referrals. Honestly, just to plan them into the marketing plan. They matter in the marketing plan. We can't forget about them.
Do you think a monster 2024 for a lot of advisors because of all the refi business that they did set up sort of the struggles to start out 2025? I mean, you mentioned the word late. I mean, I hate to call someone lazy, but like kind of taking it for granted, so to speak.
Kind of. I think they were so focused on getting the replacement business. I mean, and that's a big job. Like you have to go mine your entire client base. I mean, it's a big job. So a lot of people focusing on that, and it's a little bit easier. Like we're not closing leads. And so there was so much focus there that I just don't think there was a lot of preparation for 2025. Lazy was probably too strong of a word, but it's more of negligent maybe, that they were just negligent in having good planning and proper planning for 2025. So we did get out the gate pretty slow in this year. I mean, my 1Q reviews, I mean, some people had closed like one client in a quarter. It was just very, very slow. So I think we're now catching up. Hopefully everything will continue to move in the last 6 months more than it did the first.
When you give all this information to an advisor and you're sitting there with all this information, I think the question that comes up is, what's an advisor make of it? And it begs the question of, when do you pivot? And I think I kind of have an answer that it's not always a clear-cut yes and no. It's not a switch that you flip kind of thing. But when you look at 2025 in the first half of the year, do some advisors need to pivot? Should no advisor pivot? I mean, where do you stand on that? And what's sort of your school of thought when it comes to when an advisor needs to change up their approach?
Mm-hmm. I'm not afraid to tell them when they need to pivot, but I think a lot of advisors misunderstand what that means. I think there's a lot of definition variance right there. Pivot doesn't mean you throw a marketing funnel out. The only time you should throw a marketing funnel out is if you have struggled year over year with 1 or 2 points that you cannot get up, which I'm telling you after doing this long enough that anyone that puts their mind to fixing 1 or 2 points, they can fix it. So pivot to me means picking 1 or 2 things in the sales process that are not performing well, whether it's under benchmark, which we have a benchmark guide. If you don't have that, it's a free resource to track that advisor. So if you're underperforming in 1 or 2 places, get it up by 5%. That's what I mean by pivot. So I don't mean, killed TV after 6 months or anything like that. I just think people should really be paying attention to their sales process, the TTA top 5, which would be your stick rate, your close rate, your average case size, the days between appointments, and then like cost per set and cost per client. So if they can know those 5 and get within benchmark, that would be the area to look at and to see where they need to pivot is one of those 5 things. And there is time. I will say that. I think 6 months, it's just weird. Our industry is weird because it takes so long, but you can also make very quick changes like this stick rate problem. You take away automation very quickly and you have people calling to confirm or sending a bomb that can fix it within 2 weeks. So you can make a lot of movement in the data in 2 weeks' time, even though we have a long sales cycle.
Some of the feedback that we've gotten from advisors is the first half of the year, it's felt like there's been sort of a freeze. There hasn't been a lot of activity. So they've gotten a lot of potential prospects and first and second and third appointments, but not closing. Do you think that maybe now that with the passage of Trump's one big beautiful bill and some closure, so to speak, with the tax brackets and what happens a little bit with Social Security, do you think that might trigger any of that movement, or have you felt like there's been sort of that freeze and that could attribute to some of the slowness in 2025?
So I don't know. I get asked this question all the time. I think every
I
year,
bet you do.
every year, this is what's interesting to me. Every year, there's a reason why everyone wants to tell me why the leads are moving slow. Every year. Like it was COVID and then it was the election and now it's the bill. And so in my head, I'm kind of like, I am not a studier of the demographics of people, right? That's more of like a sociologist sort of a deal. Like I'm not studying what the people are doing. And when I look at data, I'm not seeing a trend in all of the sources and in all of the offices taking longer to close or an overall abundant amount of a lower close rate. So to me, no, like I'm not seeing that, and I think a lot of people want to use that as an excuse.
Well, it seems like a natural excuse. It does
I
seem
know.
like a good excuse.
I know. I just feel like, then why are the referrals moving? Like, why are the referrals closing at a 50, 60, 70% rate? Because wouldn't those people be scared too? Why do I have some offices that are hitting the benchmark easy peasy and other ones that aren't? Are those people in that demographic in that area of the nation not nervous? So that conflicts to me when I hear that sort of logic.
I think one thing that came up when we had our pre-call a week ago was this concept of the standard of trust is changing, and advisors need to kind of brace themselves for that mindset shift. What in your numbers or in the 2025 mid-season report kind of validates that, hey, it's taking longer, but it's not going to that part isn't necessarily going to change. Like advisors need to start to kind of adjust their process to people having more resources and more opportunities to take their money and go elsewhere. And they've got an advisor needs to work just a little bit harder than maybe they needed to do 10, 5, 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm. That's such a good point. I'm glad that you remembered that and brought that up. That speaks to what we talked about right in the beginning was the gap, right? They can research you. They can take all the time in the world. They can go look up every single financial advisor in the city before they come in and meet with you or after their first appointment. So they're going to take a minute. allow the gap to be big. That's okay. We just have to understand what it does in the downline, which we already talked about. Secondarily, it's affecting the stick rates, or just the sales process in general, like the close rates being lower for dinner seminar leads in general. They may have heard you on the radio. I do think radio and TV are incredible authority builders. Again, we can't measure that unmeasurable. I wish I could tell you that you have a higher close rate for dinner seminars if you're doing radio and TV. But I do see it. Like the offices that are doing radio and TV, they typically have people who like them. They typically have maybe a little bit quicker of a sales cycle. But to that point, and I'm glad that we were talking through it, I just think that the nature and I guess the temperature is changing in the demographic, in the sense that they're going to research you. They want to know about you. They're going to look you up. They're going to look through your website. They're going to look through your competitors' websites. And it did not used to be that way, particularly for dinner seminars. They used to read your invite. They'd come, you'd sell them. It was very transactional. It's not that. That's changing. The climate's changing there for sure on those leads specifically. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
I think it does. I think it does. Erica, thank you so much for joining us. It's always nice to say we have a friend of the show, so you're always welcome to come back and kind of share more numbers. Obviously, when 2025 finishes, you'll have another one of these reports buttoned up. We'll pencil you in tentatively for another January date to kind of go over the year that was 2025. If you're looking for, because there's still a lot of nuggets from when we sat down with Erica in January, going over kind of, I can't remember everything that we talked about, but I believe you used the phrase "eat the elephant" or something, or "kill the elephant" or something like that.
Yeah, eat the elephant.
And we talked unicorns and we talked all that. So we'll put the link to that podcast down in the description. If you're looking for more ways to grow your practice, our YouTube channel is a great resource. Selling with Stories, House Rules, all phenomenal ways for you to learn to, expand your craft and really grow your practice, for lack of a better word. So Erica, thank you once again, and we'll see you next time.